Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. As part of the Remarriage Club series, I have in the studio with me Dr. Viola Pierce, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a minute. But this very dynamic woman is going to share such a powerful story of being open to a new relationship and going for it very, very boldly. So welcome, Dr. Viola, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Please introduce yourself to the audience.
So my name is Dr. Viola Pierce. I am the owner and CEO of VP Nursing and the Nurse Nurturer, where our goal is to teach nurses how to work from their computers anywhere around the world, making money and owning their own time.
Awesome. I love that. So basically you teach nurses how to have their own business. Like, yes, ma'am. If you want to work for yourself from anywhere in the world, she's your girl.
Woman. As long as they have Wi-Fi, we're in the business.
There you go. That's awesome. So you are remarried after your divorce.
Yes, ma'am.
And why don't we start? Let's start with you telling us kind of like where your family is. What does your current family look like? And just a little bit about you, your husband, kids, etc.
So we have 5 children all together. They're 35, 33, 24, 24. We have 2 girls that are 24. The other 3 are boys and an 18-year-old. We have 6 grandchildren all together, with the 7th one on the way. And life is grand. It is fun. We have a great time. You know,
awesome.
It's just amazing.
How long have you and your husband been married?
We've been married for 6 years.
6 years. Okay. So your kids were already grown, at least, or somewhat grown.
Yes.
When you got married. Sounds like the youngest would have been 12.
Yeah. So what we actually met at we knew each other before our daughters graduated, but we actually exchanged numbers on our daughter's graduation date. They both graduated on the same day. They just graduated from 2 separate schools, and he was working. He's a law enforcement officer, and he was working my daughter's graduation. And so that's when we exchanged numbers.
Got it. Awesome. I love that. I love that. Like you had that, you know, it's almost like your families sound like you were a perfect fit. You have
perfect. It was absolutely perfect.
Right. And I tell my clients, a lot of times they're worried about, it's interesting, the divorced women who have younger kids will be worried that they won't find someone because they have younger kids. The ones who have older children will be like, oh, great, now I'm too old, right? Like my kids are grown, I'm kind of, a little older, and so I can't find someone there. And the people who have teenagers will be like, oh my goodness, my teenagers are being teenagers. No one will want all of that drama. And I want to hear your take on this, but my take is that generally what happens is like kind of attracts like. And that's been my experience and my observation of people who've successfully completed this journey.
So, interestingly enough, that's what I thought too. This is honestly what I thought when I divorced my ex-husband. I thought that the men that were good men were already married. I thought that the men that men would still want it, because very shortly after we divorced, I had a hysterectomy. And I thought that, well, what if my husband wants children? Then I won't be able to have children. And so there were so many things that were going through my mind about what I did not have. And then I had to take a turn. I had to switch it, right? And I said, you got a pretty good career, all right? You've been a nurse for a long time. You own your own home. You're cute. You're still cute.
You're very cute. I'm looking at you. You're super cute.
So, I mean, I'm not understanding why are you focusing on the negative? Because if you look for the negative, you'll find it every time. If you look for the positive, you'll find it every time. So I had to focus on my positive. And once I focused on my positive, then it was a game changer. And so that's kind of how I attracted that. So when I asked my husband about children, he was like, I don't want no more children. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I love that so much, because basically that means that there's someone for everyone. If
That's
you're
right.
not having more kids, you're going to find the guy who doesn't want any more kids. If you have small children, you'll probably find the person who wants small children. And I have one of the ladies who's scheduled to be on the podcast. She had 6 children, and she ended up with someone who had 5 children. So between them, they got a whole bunch of, but they both had the same characteristic. They needed someone who was ready for a big family.
Right. I love
Right.
that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. It's whatever you have that is your asset.
That's
For
right.
the person that you're going to be with.
Right.
All right. So let's back up a little bit to how long were you divorced before you connected with your husband?
2011, 2014. So 3 years.
Took you 3 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And were you ready? After the divorce, were you like, I'm going back out there? Or were you reluctant? What was your take on it?
So I was not reluctant. And the reason why I was not reluctant was because my parents were married for a long time. I come from a Pentecostal holiness background, and I've always imagined myself as a wife. So I really could not imagine myself, being anything other than a wife. And
Mhm.
so, I was ready to get back out there, but I was ready to get back out there way too soon because I had not yet healed myself. And you don't really know what that looks like and what that, because when you say heal yourself, you don't really understand that. And I didn't understand that. And I didn't know what that meant. All I knew was that I just didn't want to spend the rest of my life alone, right?
Mhm.
That's all I knew. And so I went back out there. But the problem when you are in a relationship that is not necessarily working, typically is on both sides. And so you
Mhm.
have to understand that you have to fix yourself in order, because you're going to take yourself into that next relationship. And
Mm.
whatever, characteristics that you had in that previous relationship, then you have to fix those characteristics. And so, there were several things that happened to me once my husband left. And when he left, I said, well, let me figure out the reasons why. Let me think about what's going on with you. And
Mhm.
when I started to work on myself, then it was a game changer.
Yeah.
And and now I attract who I am, and
Right.
my whole circle is different, not just with my husband, my whole world is different.
100. Oh my goodness. I just want to pause there. There's just so much. You just said so much in there, right? Because actually one of the things I will work with my clients on is what I call a relationship audit. And it's because after their divorce and as they're dating, as they start to understand what a healthy relationship looks like versus an unhealthy relationship, they realize that so many of their relationships are unhealthy. Their relationship with, sometimes it's a parent, sometimes it's their friends, sometimes it's their church, sometimes, I mean, not with everyone, but just they've just got this dynamic that they had with their ex-husband also going on in a lot of relationships. So could you just tell us a little bit more about how you audited, as you healed, how did that change your circle?
Well, it was interesting and interesting enough. It was a root cause. And I just, if you would allow me a little bit of time to go back to the root. So the root was that I had this friend, and I'll call her a friend, way back that when I was younger, she shunned me. Like, I looked up to her. I was a follower, and I thought that she was the best thing since Wonder Bread. We were probably about 10 years old, I guess, at this time. And she had went to the city to visit, and she came back down home. And when she came back home, I was standing on one side of the house, she was standing on the other side of the house. And she said, I wish she would stop following me. Now, we were playing, and it was me, her, and it was another little boy. So I was the only other she that was in the relationship at this time, or in the game in the space at that time. And so I knew she was talking about me, but I didn't want to accept it. And so I didn't unpack that, right? And so she eventually, as time went on, ended up not accepting me into her life. Like, she shunned me, like, she didn't want to talk to me, nothing. And what happened was, I ended up, and this is the value of going back to the root, because your root can change your fruit, right? And so I went back to my root. eventually, but it took me a long time because I didn't understand that, because I was thinking that's not a big deal. But what the big deal was that she shunned me. And when she shunned me, I felt that I was not worthy of the relationships that I should have. And so when I got into the relationship with my husband, I married him really quick because I thought that he was going to leave me. I thought, well, you're not worthy of anyone. You're not worthy of, that great relationship. And so I married him really quick. We didn't know each other really well. And, there are a lot of questions that we should have went on, a lot of things that we should have went on, and we did not. We just did not. And that ended up causing us a long time. And we stayed married for a long time because our parents were married for a long time, I think.
How long were you married?
So we were married off and on for, we divorced each other, remarried each other. Craziness as it is, but for a total of about 19 years.
19 years, married, divorced, remarried, divorced, the same person, and over a period of 19 years. Yeah, that's a long time.
But what happened during that time period was that I understood, because he left. And when he left, then I got demoted twice from my job. And what happened was I was such a high performer at work, right? So, I was an ER nurse. And so all my metrics were good. Like my daughter triage time, my no left without being seen, those things, they were amazing, right? But I was killing the staff in the process because I didn't understand how to deal with that relationship, right? And I needed to understand that. So what they did was they changed the way that the hiring process was done. And so instead of the management hiring you, then my peers were a part of that process. And they didn't want me because of the fact that I pushed so hard, right? I pushed so hard. I cared more about the patient than I cared about the staff. And the reality is that the staff is the conduit between the organization and the patient. And we have to really understand how to take care of the staff. And so then I started exploring, okay, all these people are leaving you, Viola. The main person that you are the thing that they're leaving. So what is going on with you? And so I had to take an introspective look at myself. Now, things don't happen to you. I'm a firm believer that they happen for you, right? And so that happened for me. And so what happened was I started to look for leadership training. And then I ran into John Maxwell. And so now I'm a John Maxwell speaker, coach, and trainer. And what I started to do was the first book I read was the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And when I read that book, it changed my life. It changed the way that I looked at leadership, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I started to change who I was. And once I started to change who I was, literally my entire circle is completely different now than what it was at that time.
Yeah, because the way you looked at the world and the way you showed up in the world, was 100% different.
100% different. 100% different.
Did you, and it's interesting that you mentioned that the defining moment for how you saw relationships came from when you were 10 years old. And I totally relate to that. And I'm a firm believer, this is not for everyone. Some people need this work. Some people do not. Like I always say, there's no one size that fits all. But for me, for sure, I had to do some work from my childhood. I still continue to do that work. Did you have to go through therapy? Did you just do coaching? How did you walk through the process of recognizing what the root cause was and how to change your patterns?
So I did have a coach who helped me walk through that process, but I didn't know that it was that. I knew that it was that moment. And the way that I knew that it was that moment, when you go through your doctoral degree, you have you have to defend your project, right? We're DNP, so we have a project as opposed to a dissertation, right? So we had the project that we had to do, and we had to defend it. And I remember literally standing up from the defense of that project, and God spoke to me just as clearly, because now, mind you, this person who I'm speaking of, she eventually went off to not do some not so good things. Like she started stealing from people. Like she couldn't keep a job because she was almost like a kleptomaniac, right?
Yeah.
Well, she then ended up passing away when we were in our 20s. And I wasn't close to her, and I felt the pain of it, right? But I still wasn't close to her. Anyway, it ended up that God said, he spoke to me just as clearly. He said, you would not be where you are had I left her in your life. And what we do is we try to hold on to people that God does not design for our life. People come into your life, I'm a Tyler Perry fan. People come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And the problem is that we put lifetime expectation on seasonal folks.
Oh,
And
that's a word right there.
and when people walk out of your life, you got to let them go. And when TD Jakes said that, because I say all the time, he has this video that's it's called Nothing Just Happens. And so when with that video, I say, if that video was watched 1 million times, I watched it 500,000 times, because I had to get that in my spirit. I had to get it in my spirit because I love people and I don't like to say goodbye. I want to keep you as a friend, even though you may be toxic in my life. But I've learned that I've got to let people go because for my own mental health. And so, when he said that, and he quoted the scripture, it's they came out from us, that it may be manifested they were not of us. For had they been of us, no doubt they would have continued with us. That thing changed my life.
Yeah.
People walk out of your life because they are not tied to your destiny. And I had to understand that my ex-husband walking out of my life was because he was not tied to my destiny.
Yeah.
And my life was exponentially different once he did walk out.
Yeah. Yeah. I use slightly different language because I came through. So after my divorce, I walked through more recovery therapy coaching, but I'm just like amazed at all the parallels in the stories, because I was that girl too. I was like, hold on to everyone. Like my high school, like after high school, everyone kind of dissipated, went everywhere. I was the first person who like started an alumni website, put everyone's information there. I was like gathering people from the ends of the earth onto the alumni website, that kind of thing. Because of that, and the language used in psychology is that sense of abandonment, wanting to belong, wanting that sense of family, even though you might have a family for whatever reason, whatever happened. And of course, I won't tell my story on your on your episode. That sense of like just needing people in your life can really take you down a path that's like not healthy. And so for me, that was also unhealthy. I was never going to divorce my ex, no matter what he did, which is, now that I look back, I'm like, that was kind of crazy. Like, girl, you should have left that a long time ago. Yeah. So that's really powerful. So that was it about like kind of like the relationship, like how you kind of redefined how you showed up in relationships in your life and how you walked through that. How did you feel after this healing process? Like if you could just describe how you felt kind of at the beginning when you started realizing things were different, and then how you felt, like literally feeling in your heart and in your mind after this process.
So at the beginning, I felt broken. I felt like I was broken. I felt like, who's going to want you? And then once I got through the healing process, it was just, well, we just, I'm whole now. I'm whole. I'm 100%. And whoever gets me will get an amazing woman. Yeah. And that is exactly how I looked at it. And so I looked at it as, I'm going to give everybody my phone number who asked for it. Okay. Everybody. If you want a phone number, I'm gonna give you my phone number. And so literally it was, if I get a good date, then fine. I'm not falling in love on the first date like I normally do, because I love people, right? I'm gonna see how you are. And then if you're good, then we're in the business. But if you're not, then we're not. So
you dated offline. You didn't use the dating apps, correct?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so I love this because I have my clients, I have my dating app camp, and then I have my offline dating camp. My recommendation is always, listen, we can use both. I teach you how to use both, but I really want you to like talk about what that looked like for you. You're like, okay, I am meeting people, I am meeting guys, I'm giving everybody my phone number, right? What was that journey like?
So I just, if I met them, I met them. If I didn't, I didn't. I was looking actively for them. They didn't know I was looking actively for them, but I knew. And so there was this lady who came to the emergency department, and she started talking to me about she started talking to me about prayer. And she said that whenever you pray, you need to pray in specifics. And so I prayed in specifics. She recommended a book by Mark Batterson. It's called The Circle of Prayer. And then I'd heard, not just with her, with someone else, a pastor, that said, you know what you want. God knows what you want. If you tell God what you want, then and he shows up, then you know it's from God, right? Because if you don't tell God what you want, then you won't know. And so, you have people who have these, you had 200 qualifications for the man. I can't remember 200 qualifications.
Well, I think I had close, either somewhere between 60 and 80 was mine.
60 and 80. And that's because you're smart and you can remember that. I can't remember all the qualifications.
Well, here's the thing. This is what I say, is that there's no one size that fits all. It's not a formula. People are always looking for a formula. Should I have 5 things or should I have 100 things? I'm like, it's not a formula. It depends on you and the guy that you're looking for and how things work. You sound like you're super intuitive to me. Like, I teach my clients how to tap into their intuition. You were like, I don't need this list because I got my intuition sharpened up. Right.
But I think it's your personality, right?
That's
so
true.
Some people have I use the DISC assessment all the time. So some people have a C personality where you have to be very detailed, right? I mean, I'm an ER nurse, right? We ain't got to be detailed about nothing. Okay.
Right. Well, actually, in this case, I think mine was because I didn't have the parents that you had. See, I had no data on a healthy relationship. None. I had to sit down and say, when a man is a good man, this is what it looks like. When a man loves a woman, this is what I had to look around me. And I've told this on the podcast, at work, I would listen for the guys who were loving their wives, and I'd write down, okay, he called her cutie. The man who loves you will give you a little pet name. I needed the little subtle signs that I hadn't observed over a lifetime.
That's really good. That's really
good. So it was my but it was my engineering mind. I will say that.
That C personality, that detail.
Yes.
See, I didn't have detail.
Yeah. But it worked. And the results, I always tell people, your results will tell you if you're doing it right.
That's right.
Right? I mean, you got the results. So listen, I am not going to knock any part of your process. I want to hear all of it.
I mean, I like it whenever, people are different, right? Because that is what the world is made of, and it gives me, because people who are detail oriented make my life so much better. Okay. Because I am not detail oriented. And so sometimes I'll walk into things that I shouldn't walk into. So, yeah.
Okay. So you had your list of 5 things, and then you had your spirit was connected. You were like, you knew it. You knew you would know when you were in it. So what happened next?
So once she said that, I read the book, and then I just developed those 5 things, and not really knowing that I knew what that were 5 things. That's a lie. I asked God, and I would ask him for it every morning. And I said, Lord, I need someone who is all about you, someone who is all about me, someone who is someone who has a job, someone who is good looking, at least at the beginning. Okay. I mean, he'll, may eventually not be so good looking, but at least at the beginning, let him be easy on the eyes. And then the last thing was that I wanted him to be good in bed. Yeah. And so, of course, you can't figure that last one out at the beginning. So I went for the first 4, right? Because, you want to wait a little bit of time in order to, figure out the last one, right? You can't just jump right into that. Right. And so
tell us more about when he's all about you, what you meant by all about you. Because I think a lot of women have a hard time figuring out when a guy's interested. They go by a lot of words. He said he's interested.
So for me, it was, like you said, those subtle cues. You know, and I like how you said that because it makes a difference. You know, Simon Sinek, you know, I listen to all these people. So Simon Sinek said, how did you know that you loved your wife, right? Or that your wife loved you? It wasn't just they loved you and you knew that they loved you. It's those little hints, those little cues along the way, right? And so all about me was, you know, I'm an old-fashioned type of girl. And so, you know, for example, he would open my door. Okay. Chivalry is not dead. He would open my door. He would be very respectful of me. He would pay for my dinner, you know, because people like to go Dutch. And I'm just like, no, that's not the way we're going to do things here. Either you pay for the dinner or we're probably not going to go out. Although I actually did not agree. I asked my husband, did he want me to pay for the first dinner? He was like, no. And I was like, he the one.
Like
he the one.
Yeah, I did the same on my first date. I always offered because I was like, listen, I don't want any guy to think something's going to happen here just because you paid for dinner. Like, so I would offer, and some gentlemen would be like, oh, no, I'll pay for it. I don't remember. I don't think anyone ever took me up on it on the first date. As I think the months went along with my husband and we were just like eating out, I don't know, 10 times a week. He allowed me to contribute to that process.
He said, I'm going broke.
He's like, you know, it's okay if you pay for me. So I'm like, I will pay. If you want me to, I will pay. All right. So you started meeting people. How many people did you meet in this process of dating offline? Like, what were your numbers like?
So my numbers weren't high. And so I met after I healed. Okay. So before I healed, I met a couple, but after I healed, there were 3 that I met. And one, I knew that I would not, I'm a talker. I like to talk and I like to interact with people. And so he was not a talker. He would always text me and I was just like, this is not the way that we're going to go with this. And then he would, you know, he would say stuff like, I make a good husband. Well, you don't have to tell me that. I'll know. Okay.
Right.
But then there was another guy that I met. So on the day that the story is that I was coming out from my daughter's graduation, I walked past him. He was, you know, he was one of the cops that was, you know, at the graduation. And we started talking. Now, mind you, we had known each other for about 9 years, 8 or 9 years prior to. But I was married at the time. He was not. And he used to bring involuntary commitment patients to the hospital. And he said that he would always volunteer to bring those patients to the hospital because he would be able to see me until he found out that I was married. Once he found out I was married, then he wasn't interested anymore. Right. And so then I came out and we started talking about relationships. And we started talking about relationships. He was telling me about all the women that he thought, you know, that were not doing him right. And I said, well, you're just not dating the right women. I said, how about you take down my number? And so he took down my number. And when he took down my number, I walked in the bathroom, came on back out, went to the graduation, and everything was all good. He knew that I was having a graduation party that evening. Fast forward, we go to that evening. There was this guy that rolls up on the motorcycle and he was fine.
So this is a different guy.
This is a different guy. So he was fine. I was like, because, you know, you remember, I was like Oprah, like the cars, right? You get my number, you get my number, you get my number. Everybody was getting my number, right? And so I gave him my number. And so we said that we were going to talk the next day. So the next day, I called up the guy with the motorcycle first, of course, because, you know, you want to call up the bad guy first, right? The one that's, you know, the bad boy. Yeah. So I called him up first and then we started talking to each other and I asked him, I said, so what do you do for a living? He said, I'm a chef. And I said, are you? And he said, yes. And I said, so what do you work? And he said, I don't. And I said, well, Lord, is this the one for me? And he said, well, didn't you ask me for somebody with a job? And I said, well, yes, I did, Lord. And I said, okay. So I hung up.
This is not the one.
And I ain't call him no more. Okay. We ain't talk. He texts, I ain't call him no more. I just cut it off. And so then I called up my husband and I said, I wanted to go out. And we wanted to go to a restaurant that was here And the restaurant was a pretty fancy restaurant. It was pretty expensive. And I said, I did offer to pay since it was the first date, right? And he said, no, we're not. And so we went to the restaurant. We had an amazing time. The conversation just flowed extremely well. Came back home. And then by the third night, I knew that we would be married to each other if things didn't change. And things has not changed over the 6 years we've been married. It's been an amazing journey.
I love that. How long from the time you went on that first date till when you got married?
6 months. No, a year. A year. A little over a year. So it was June 14th, that first day. And then it was July 18th is our wedding anniversary. So a little over.
So you saw him in every season before you made the commitment. You're like, this is what you look like in winter, in summer, spring, fall, just to be sure.
Yep. And he was just amazing. And this is the value of marrying someone or being connected with someone. So before like I ever got married to him the first time, I was an LPN. I got my LPN. I went back to school to get my LPN. When we were divorced, in the middle of that divorce, during the time that we were married, I never grew, never could go back to get back anything. So in the middle, I got my RN degree.
Well, in the middle of the divorce.
In the middle of the divorce, the two marriages, I went back and got my RN degree. Well, we got remarried, didn't grow during that time either. When I divorced him the second time, I went back to school to get my BSN. Well, I met my husband in the middle of my BSN. All right. Well, I was going to school to get my BSN at that time. Well, within that, from then to now, I've got my doctoral degree. I got my BSN, I got my master's, I got my doctoral degree.
Wow.
Because it was good ground, because he provided that support, because it is, and I don't think that people really realize, and some people can thrive in those relationships, but I just couldn't. My home was horrible, you know?
So let me recap. You were already an LPN when you got married the first time. So you got one additional degree in 19 years. And you got 3 more degrees in 6 years.
Right, exactly.
Once that person was gone.
Right. Because your home, and this is the thing, when you hit my front doorstep, that's my peace.
Yeah.
When you have peace in your home, you can grow, right?
I love that.
You have a safe space.
I love that.
And I have my safe space here. And so nobody can come to my house. I mean, my husband ain't gonna let you come to my house.
It's like, Viola's building a business. She's getting her doctor. What are you doing here? Why are you messing with her? Love it. I love that so much. It sounds to me like part of your success was that you did the work to show up differently in the world. Like just like you just showed up as a different person and you chose someone different, because I know you showed up differently, but you also chose different, like you took certain actions. You had the spiritual side and you had the prayer and you were like, I want to do it the way my spiritual tradition, influences me to do it. But you also had this amazing openness to people, to dating, to being out in the world, which sometimes I will talk to people who are like, I'm waiting on God, right? And then they're not taking any action. Do you have anything to say to help?
The story about, waiting on God,
What is the story about waiting on God? Tell me.
So, there's, and I don't forget all the mechanisms that God had sent this guy, but this guy was stranded out on this boat.
I've heard that story. Please tell it.
And so, I know that one was that he,
and God sent a little
and
thing, yeah.
And
he sent a raft, he sent a boat, he sent a ship.
Right. And then he sent a helicopter. And then, and he said, well, I was waiting on you. And God said, well, I sent you all those things,
Right.
and that is the truth. We have to be in action. We have to not be scared. And I think one of the things that a lot of people do is that, we talked about it just before getting on the podcast, is getting, being scared, right? Just don't be scared. I mean, of course you have to maintain a certain level of safety. You have to make sure that he's not, completely crazy, right?
Yeah.
But that's part of the process. And listening to those cues, because you get them.
Yeah.
Everybody gets them. If you date anybody more than 6 months, they're gonna give you some cues, because they're gonna show up as their real self. And when they show up as their real self, the problem is that we give too many people we give grace and mercy to it. Right. You can't give grace and mercy to a person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And I think part of mine was that I had 2 children, right? I had 2 children, and I wanted them to see, we talked about my parents being married for 62 years. I wanted them to see that type of, that type of love. Yeah. I wanted them to see what that looked like. And so like right now, I know that everybody doesn't agree with this, but I'm gonna tell you what my stance on marriage and being in a blended family and how we show up with each other. God is first, my husband is second, and my children are third. And it is not because I'm putting my children, it's not because I'm forsaking my children, it is for the sake of my children. Because how I show them, how I show up with my husband is how they will show up in their relationships. And then it will therefore affect each generation that comes.
Right. 100%. Yeah. And I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. You chose with your children in mind. Because sometimes I've heard like a little bit of confusion around that order, which, the order is like your personal philosophy. But I've also counseled a woman who's dating a man. So she's dating and trying to establish that order while they're dating. So this is someone who has young children. She's met someone online and he's trying to be number one or number two. Like and it's like, no, this is something that you do after the ring is on. There are certain things that happen after the ring is on.
There is order, there is order to everything. And when you operate outside of that order, it's sort of like whenever you are, of course I'm a nurse, so I'm gonna relate it back to nursing, right? When you have these procedures that you do, right? We have procedures that we do on patients. And the reason why we do them in a certain order is for the safety of the patient, right? Yes. It's for the safety. Well, when you come outside of that order, then what happens is the patient is compromised. So you have to stay in that order, right? Because if you don't stay in that order, then your patient is again compromised. And so I'm in order. My husband was not before. When we were dating, my children were number one after God. But after we got married, he is number one. He is my number one. He treats my children. Now, of course, I needed to know that he was going to treat my children well.
Right.
And he treats my children like they're his, and I treat his like they're mine. I mean, they're all ours. Yeah. We have 5 children, we have 6 grandchildren.
I love that so much. And this is where my engineering mind kind of comes in with like those procedures, because I have in my program what I call relationship gates for people who are still dating. And then when you are exclusive with someone, we have relationship milestones. So like you're going in order and you're figuring all of these things out. Is this going to work for my kids? Is this person going to work for my money? Is this person going to work for my vision? Is this person going to work for my safety? Like you're going through all those gates as you go. And then even after you're like, okay, he's the one. Before you get married, you have milestones. We got to do this. He's got to meet this person. And all of those are like checks and balances to make sure that happens. And because when I got remarried, it was the same thing. I was like, I have 2 teenagers. They're at that stage where it's like certain things were super important. Little did I know that when my daughter was going away from home for her freshman year in college, that I would have just had surgery. Like I had surgery, so I could not go with her to New York to drop her off in college. Guess who had to take her? My husband.
Oh.
Imagine if I had married anyone other than a person who could safely take my daughter to New York and make her first day on campus in a new city amazing, right? It's just like, we have to think about those things going.
That's right.
We got to think about those things going. Like you said, you're choosing for your daughters. You were choosing for a person who could show up at their weddings,
That's
a
right.
person who would be grandfather to your grandchildren. Like these are all things that sometimes in the middle of that like romantic dinner, you forget to think about that.
Right.
Yeah. That's
And those
amazing.
are cues, and you really have to pay attention to that because, you know, I just think about how when I look back at how my father, me and my father, how my father treated me, right? When I think about how he did for me, you carry that, right?
Yeah.
So, I had a bunch of mouth when I was younger. I mean, we all, most of us girls do. Okay. So I had a bunch of mouth when I was younger. And my dad always showed up for me. He always, he was like,
Yeah.
she got mouth, but that's okay. And so
Yeah.
then when my daughter had mouth, okay, when she got an attitude, I still showed up for her. Right.
Right.
Because all the time. And so those are the things that I wanted to see in my husband. And, God, because I prayed to him, and I'm a firm believer that he sent him my way because I prayed to him and I prayed in specifics, and we talked about it literally all the time, right?
It was on your mind. You made it a
Right?
priority. I
Exactly,
love that.
exactly. And so once I got him, it was a game changer. And we have an amazing relationship.
I want to
An
talk about that. What's been
amazing.
surprising for you? Like, what are you guys about? Like, if you were to say, you know how like your relationship brand, what kind of things that do you guys do? How do you have fun?
Well, I describe us all the time as a power couple. You know,
Man.
and the reality is that we are very, like, we really, really have each other's back no matter what. I mean, no matter what. And the thing about my husband is that he showed me, like, he has put in the work and he has showed me how he's going to do. And so I don't like, there may be some things that I may not like to do, but I'm going to do it if he likes it because he has put in the work for me. He has shown me, he has led my household.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a pretty strong, dominant D. I mean, I'm a,
So
am
was
just,
he was a Christian as well?
he was
Was that
Christian as well.
compatibility already there?
It was already there. It was
Okay.
already there. Now, he didn't go to church as much as I did. I went to
Okay.
church every Sunday. He didn't go to church. He actually started going to my church. And so it's now our church. But, the reality is that he didn't do that, but he did have that Christian background. But he was very, very just like he catered to me. And even today, he caters to me and I'm okay to him.
Yeah.
And
So he comes to your church now.
right.
How did you know? I know I'm going into a lot of questions about like the spiritual aspect because I do have some clients, not small, I don't know, I would say about a quarter of my practice are Christian women. And there's just so much misinformation about what it means to be Christian and divorced, Christian and dating, Christian and married, right? And so sometimes there's this, oh, well, he says he'll come to church with me story. How did you know he was going to keep coming to church with you after?
I didn't know. I mean, it wasn't
Did you
something that
care? Like, was that
absolutely, absolutely,
well, you
absolutely.
took that risk that he might
I did.
not.
And you're right. I took that risk that he may not, but you never know how people, I mean, I don't know how he's going to act 10 years down the road.
That
Right?
is so true. We're not in control.
All I know is the history of what has happened up until now. And so history is the best indicator of the future, right? And so the reality is that he, for the whole time from the very beginning, I told him that was super important for me. This is that one was a game. That was a stop. If you can't go to church, if you don't like Christ, if you don't like, I mean, we're not going to argue over religion. We're not going to argue over whether you're Christian or not. If you are atheist, then we're not going to be together. We're unequally yoked. So that's not where I'm going to go. Right.
Right. So you had your deal breakers set and you were very clear about them.
Very clear.
Right. And he was like, okay, I'm good to go. And you knowing that, okay, I can't change this person, but this person is willing to work with me on this. Plus, because there's always a pattern of behavior. It wasn't just one promise.
Right.
He was showing character as a human.
Exactly. Yeah. I look how you said that.
I have these conversations every day, multiple times a day. So that's why I'm clarifying, because I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got something there for someone who's listening. So I'm pulling out all the little details so that like as many people as possible can learn, because there's no one formula. And I have to work with every client individually. People who write into me, I have to give them like really custom understanding. And in the end, it's always about, I think every woman, we just have to grow up. I always say it's like we have to grow up. These are not things that you can like read from a book or you just have to understand life. And this is why I'm having you and the other guests on, is because you've kind of figured life out in this area. So I'm pulling out all these details for them. All right, let me ask this question. What's next for you? What's next for your family? Like what new and exciting things are you all working on?
So right now we're working on building generational wealth. Honestly, we're very intentional. I'm very intentional about my path in life. I know that I'm currently an entrepreneur. I know that we will have several streams of income. I know that, my husband won't always work for someone else. I won't always work for someone else. We will have passive income that on that end. Okay. So that's on the business end. But I know that the goal for the family is for us to be a very close knit family. So we're forming those traditions now, right? And so, for example, so the two older children, so they have their families already established, and they're a little bit more stable. Of course, when you're 24 and 18, you fly by the seat of your pants.
You're figuring it out.
And so, once they get a little bit more stable and, although they go on vacations with us and things of that nature, what we want to do is we want to form that bond so that the whole entire family, so that we're always together, so that we're always nurturing, we're always loving each other. But, they're all in different cities. And so trying to pull them together, sometimes can be a little bit difficult, but that's the goal. The goal at the end of the day is for this to be their safe space, for this to be the house that they come to, that they can receive love, that they can also receive chastisement for the things that they, and not necessarily chastisement, but really a nurturing, growing mindset, right?
Yeah.
Because it's time over for us to stay settled and not grow economically, okay? And not grow spiritually and not grow emotionally. I mean, we have to have that growth over and over and over. And we have to have those conversations. It's not going to be perfect every time, and everything is not going to work out every time. But the goal is for us to move towards that shore perfection, so that we are, and I'm not going to look back at them because they're 50 paces from the shore and I'm 5 paces from the shore and say that you're not worthy of, that's not the way that this is. This is a growth environment, and we just want to love them. We want to love them without a shadow of a doubt. And we want to show them that love, because if we show them that love, then what I know for a fact is that our grandchildren will be shown that love, and that their children will be shown that love. Because at the end of the day, if we can I'm a firm believer, if we can love God and we can love other people, then we got 98% of it right. So.
Yeah. Oh, Dr. Viola, that is so inspiring. Like just your breadth of vision from having to rebuild after 19 years, 2 divorces, and in an environment where your growth was just held back so much, like you just taking this post-divorce journey, and you've crammed so much vision and so much growth and so much rebuilding into 6 years. Like that is so inspiring. And I know the women listening are just going to listen to you and hear what's possible for them. So I really just want to appreciate you for being willing to share openly about your life and where you're going and what you're doing and the work that you're doing with your family. I know blending a family is not an easy job, even in the best of circumstances. Like you said, even the logistics of it can be so challenging. So just thank you so much for being willing to share openly. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to tell these amazing ladies, some of whom I know are nurses, where they can find you, how they can reach out to you, if they want to talk to you, coach with you, build a business with you, where can they find you?
So I'm on all the social media outlets. Most of them, YouTube under the Nurse Nurturer. We have a YouTube channel where I, especially if you're a nurse, I would love to interview you, because all of us have stories that for us to overcome. And I do a podcast very much in the same way, which is just, on YouTube. And then of course I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and at VP Nursing. And then of course in my website, and that's V as in Victor, P as in Paul, nursing.com. And we're on Clubhouse too all the time. I host a Clubhouse room every Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we talk about your big audacious goals.
Oh, I'm going to join that. I want to be in that room. Thank you so much. We're going to add all of those links in the show notes. Ladies, make sure you click through to the show notes, follow Dr. Viola Pierce all over her website, social media, and on YouTube. Thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you, Dr. Viola, for being here.
Thank you for having me. This has been super fun. I've had a good time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.